Everyone, welcome to today's Sifted Talks in partnership with Box. We're just waiting for attendees to connect to the Zoom audio. So this is your moment to run to the kitchen to get a nice cold drink if you're in the market for one. We're very excited to hear about how scaling companies are deploying AI agents and other tools and how they're navigating the sort of thorny governance issues which come with them. Before we get into all of that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Maya. I'm a reporter and podcast producer at Sifted. I focus on UK tech and have a particular interest in policy and AI companies. So this Sifted Talks is a good one for me. So as I mentioned, today we are talking about how growing companies are actually deploying AI in a scalable, safe way. We will hear about how companies which are using AI internally to boost and speed up operations, as well as helping scaling businesses and enterprises pilot and then use it at a bigger scale. They will tell us about their successes, failures, and how they're addressing security concerns of using these tools. Please do put any and all questions in the chat, and I will try and get through as many as possible. There will be no standalone Q&A section of this discussion, so we'll kind of take these rolling throughout. So please don't wait until the end. I'm under strict instructions to tell you that the Q&A box is not actually in the chat section of this Zoom link, but if you press the three dots on more, you'll see the Q&A box. And please just post your questions in there. So without further ado, Omar, please could you introduce yourself and just explain what Box does and what companies it works with?
Sure. So I'm Omar Davison. I'm one of the solution engineers here at Box. My role essentially means that I work with organizations both small and big and help them understand how they could use Box to utilize and protect their content, and then also look down to the AI world as well. So Box, we're a content management platform that essentially means any of the IP or protected unstructured data that you have, think images, videos, audios, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, etc., having them and storing them in one place that's secure and governed, which you can then use to expose and to gain the benefits out of things like AI and the like. In terms of the customers, we work with, as I mentioned, with everything from small organizations up to the likes of NASA, BBC Studios, Spotify, Airbnb, and the like. So every industry, every sort of organization, big and small, is where we come into play.
Great. Lucien, could you do the same for Naboo now?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Lucien, one of the co-founder and CPO of Naboo. We are an end-to-end solution for corporate events. That means that on one hand, we are helping organizers within the companies to organize like source venues, negotiate the ratings, and also manage all the logistics. But also on the other end, we are helping procurement teams and finance teams to manage the spendings, the compliance, but also the payments. We are building an AI solution to the core of the product because we like to define ourselves as a service as software.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thibault?
Hi, everyone. I'm Thibault, in charge of ecosystem and partnerships at Dust. Dust is a platform that lets you build and manage AI agents for your organization. These agents are no code, connected to your data, and fully customizable. And what you need to remember about it is they go really beyond skills. You should think about it as digital workers that your teammate can collaborate with, train, improve, and that could also work autonomously. And we work with a wide range of customers, pretty focused on B2B and fintech. We have customers like Vanta, Paddle, 1Password, to give you examples of the types of people we work with, who really want to deploy AI at scale within their organization for not just engineers, but any type of function.
And finally, Jannat, we're lucky enough to have an investor on this panel. So could you tell us about the companies that you invest in?
Sure, Maya. Thanks for having me. I'm Jannat. I'm based in London and I'm an investor with Forestay Capital. We invest in enterprise AI software across Europe and a bit of the US as well. And we invest in stages from about Series A to C with a sweet spot around Series B. So lots of activity going on in those stages with AI at the moment. So very keen to dig a bit deeper with panelists here on what we're seeing in the market.
Great. So to just start with quite a broad question for you, Omar, how do you help Box's customers successfully identify what they want to move from pilot to production?
Sure. I think we're all in agreement. I would assume that the term AI is quite a broad stroke term that can really mean a lot of different things. We've heard already on this panel that Lucien, Jannat, and Thibault are looking at it in a different way than me and my organization and my company is looking at it. So really, when we engage with organizations and kind of figure out how AI can help them in the world of content and the idea of managing their corporate information, we look at it from really one of three pillars and trying to narrow the scope of their focus. Are they looking to improve on individual productivity? Is it the idea that they're trying to get their individual employees better, faster working with the likes of agents and Copilot and Claude and Gemini? Are they looking at departmental efficacy? So is it the automation of processes, introducing co-work or Copilot to kind of streamline end-to-end sequences of work and the business itself? Or are they looking at organizational efficiency? So really sort of to what Lucien mentioned, sort of AI first approach where the business is built on the foundation and the knowledge of AI and kind of going it through. Those three pillars are really how we've sort of aggregated and bucketed the different types of approaches, and then each of them have their own respective considerations and thoughts that need to go into it. But that's typically how we sort of lean towards the approach.
And are you seeing the balance shift towards any of them, particularly over the last sort of 6 to 12 months? Or is it, are there trends that you can kind of speak to about your different customer groups?
Yeah, I think a lot of them aspire to be operational efficiency and the likes of Lucien in terms of like AI first. But the reality is when organizations are a little more traditional or have been around for a while, the value that they get often comes from the individual productivity because they have so many guardrails and processes and regulations that they have to adhere to when it comes to changing the business that the quickest wins, the low-hanging fruit have often been, can I save my team 30 minutes of their day to be more efficient or to understand things or to process little individual components? And then it's sort of like a growing curve from that point. So in their minds, they're all operational efficiency. The reality is probably individual productivity moving on to departmental efficacy is where we see a lot of sort of long-standing companies come into play.
How does that resonate with you and your customers, Thibault?
Yeah, this definitely resonates. I think the one key element is making sure that your organization is ready to get on that trajectory. And it's important to think about it as a trajectory and not like a direct path to the outcome. And so usually what we see with customers is they're going to identify use cases or pain points that they have. And the successful ones are going to be able to very quickly develop a first version of it, which solves a portion of that pain point, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be fully automated. It's just a matter of like, maybe if I'm a salesperson, I need to find access to the right information, the right customer testimonials to back my story. And therefore I'm just going to build an agent for this. This takes really minutes. And so gradually, basically, you're going to go from small ROI, individual productivity or shared productivity when it's about knowledge access, right? But then move your way up the ladder to a point where possibly you'll have a full stack autonomous agent that does the work or a big portion of that work.
And how long does that sort of trajectory or customer journey tend to take?
So it depends on, I would say, organizational readiness, because in some organizations you get stuck quite rapidly because you don't necessarily like open the right data, or you get stuck into like the ambitions you set for so if you said, for instance, I need the ROI in 2 weeks and I need to make sure that everything is under control, the project may be set up for failure at the start. But when you have these conditions met, honestly, it's just a matter of a few minutes or hours of work to get something that really generates the momentum. So having a prototype that works can be really, really fast. And then it's just about how do you enable the teams to learn from them and compound knowledge. So early adopters can get value really quickly. In order to really get the impact, you want to make sure that they are trained. They're training the rest of the team to do that. But you can really get quick results in a matter of a few days.
And you guys launched in 2022. How have you seen the organizational readiness? Has that improved? Are customers coming to you better equipped to build agents?
Yeah, it's definitely has changed. I'd say 2022, 2023, just the notion of having agents and organizational AI was an abstract concept. And many people will tell you, no, there's going to be a single point solution to every single department. And the idea of having a shared workspace, shared agents was not really there. I think now the market has been educated both to horizontal platforms, but also agentic in general, which is making a lot of this easier because people get a better intuition on what AI can do for them. What I think is really going to change in the next few months, it already started changing, is I think too many people right now are focused on skills and individual productivity, but the real value of AI is really shared productivity. And I think that's what Omar talked about, department efficiency. And we believe efficiency is about collaboration between agents and humans, sometimes across departments as well. If you're a salesperson, you want to prepare for a deck for a customer, you may need information from marketing, you may need information from the product teams, from engineers to back your data. And you don't want to be able to just download something, copy, paste in Slack, ask for feedback, etc. This should be a cohesive experience. And these types of things, like having a hybrid workforce, is a paradigm shift that hasn't been happening yet. And therefore, if you project this a bit more, I think that the discussion very soon will be about how do I manage a fleet and a hybrid workforce of humans and digital workers, which comes with a lot of different challenges, cost control, sovereignty over the providers, security, what's happening, like how do I make sure that these agents can actually do things in a way that's secure. This is really the trend that's changing. It's more about like how do we manage this at scale than should we even start doing it.
Lucien, you are a good person to talk about a more hybrid workforce. Could you kind of talk about Naboo's introduction of AI twins, why you did it, and sort of early successes or an early assessment of it?
Yeah, to give you a little bit more of context, we did a lot of mistakes the past 2 years. We thought initially that we were able to sell a tool to help our customer to organize events. But actually, our customers are interested in the events themselves. So what we understood, and maybe what this is the main difference with an AI model, is that we are not selling the tool, we are selling the outcome, right? And on our side, the painful truth was that none of our customers are really interested how powerful AI is, the model and stuff. They're interested of the outcomes of the AI. So basically, they want like quick quotes, a precise one, and they want to organize quickly their events and that it will be a good event. So what we understood it was that we need to invisibilize AI into our company, and that in a way, nothing has to change, so everything could change, right? So that means that we decided to leverage our own people. So we built something called the AI Twin. So we are a business of service. So every customer has an account manager at Naboo. The problem is that you cannot scale. This is one of the biggest challenge in our industry, in the event industry, is that you cannot scale your revenue if you're not scaling the people, right? So we have built AI Twin. Basically, it's an agent that is based on the tone of voice, the past conversation, the history of each one of our account manager. And on a daily basis, the AI Twin is managing all the back and forth. That is 80% actually of the organization of an event. And the 20% is managed by the account manager for everything that is based on trust, actually. And that means that we are a service business, so we need to trust remains, actually. So yes, this is the AI Twin concept.
And could you speak about sort of early successes? How have you seen and how have you measured the efficiency gains from these AI twins and maybe like customer satisfaction?
Yeah, so the great thing about like having an AI twin in the event industry is that you can answer to clients in minutes instead of hours, like evenings, weekends. So that was the first success, obviously. The second one, and I think the most important one, is our ability to leverage our capacity. On average, for example, an event manager was or in a traditional event agency, you can manage around 7 to 10 events a month. I think we are right now at mostly 70 events a month, but we are heading to more 100 events a month managed by the same person, because AI twins are talking to a lot of our customers, and then you can focus only on the crucial moments when you need to have on the phone, for example, for a very specific thing that needs trust your customers. So those were the first success, yes, with the AI twins.
And in terms of the AI twins, how, in terms of moving them from pilot to production, like how much human oversight was there at first? How did you actually get this to a position where you're now kind of fully deploying it?
Yeah, so we were very pragmatic about it, and I think everyone here is building the agents the same way. Basically, at first you're doing 90% human, right? And you're only delegating one of the tasks, and there is a lot of human in the loop, right? So you need to gauge everything at first and to test it on first a small sample, and then you enlarge it. And so this is the way, and one by one, you're getting to every use case to be sure that everything is going fine. And still today, some things are always gated. When we're talking about money, availabilities from venues, we're still confirming it with our account managers, obviously. But yeah, it was very pragmatic in a way. And at first it was 90% human. And now we are just getting to a more kind of Pareto law. So 80% like managed by an agent and 20% by an account manager.
Perfect, thank you. Jannat, are you seeing sort of similar moves being made by your portcos and like more widely in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a word that Lucien just used, invisibilification, is quite appropriate actually. So there are two prongs to AI with our portfolio companies. There's the AI that they use in-house, being tech-native companies trying to automate processes and just run more efficiently as an organization. And then there's the less invisible part of AI as a value delivery, given that they are all enterprise software companies. So it's quite an interesting one where you have to practice what you preach, and these are tech-savvy people who want to automate as much as possible, and they naturally see the benefit of what it takes to become an AI first or AI native company by design and automate. So they will be using the services of Box and Dust and the like in-house to build. And then there's what they deliver outside, which is, AI tooling for companies and larger enterprises. And what you see is internally, there are definitely pilots going on. Sometimes at pilot stage, you can be a bit trigger happy. You can try a lot of experimentation of what you want to automate. And there is a nuance. Where do you need a human in the loop? And is it really agentic? Is it really that kind of process? Do you need it to be agentic? So I'd say there's probably been a lot of discovery of being maybe overexcited and then having to pull back and say, okay, in the pilot, we actually learned this. This doesn't need to go into production because, quite frankly, RPA or previous generation tool was enough. You don't need a full-scale AI solution. And then there are learnings on whether you should have a human in the loop, you shouldn't have a human in the loop. And you learn all of these things through pilot. For example, if you're a deeply domain verticalized AI solution offering something to an enterprise client, so the visible part of your AI, should you have a human in the loop to check something that might be regulated and going to the client? Yes. Are you liable for that? Yes. Maybe in-house you're automating some handover from sales to solution engineering. Do you need a human in the loop? Maybe for cultural reasons, yes, you do. Maybe if it's just some other sort of transfer from, say, your CRM system into some other system, probably don't. So you do have these kinds of pilots that are, some are successful, a lot have learnings on where you shouldn't be so trigger happy with using AI internally.
And where are you seeing, in what areas are you seeing companies maybe draw back a bit from the AI? Where are people being very trigger happy and then deciding maybe, as you said, this isn't something that needs an agent or needs automating?
I think it comes back to something Lucien said, where the client doesn't care about certain processes on your side being handled by AI. They care about the experience, knowing that they can talk to a specialist if they find out that they're talking to an AI, perhaps on an early communication when, maybe the email is a little bit generic or gives away the game a little bit, the client gets upset and the client wants to feel the love and the attention, and so they should. So I would say some of the maybe marketing initiatives that I think we've all been subject to an AI generated email at some point and, been addressed as first name, last name, or, something maybe a little bit more sophisticated than that. But it does grate on people and it does affect the brand. So I'd say people are more pulling back on the marketing side of things and making sure that they offer a good experience, both for prospective new clients, but also existing clients, to make sure they feel that customer connection. And I think that's one of the values actually of AI, to be able to try and automate most of the nitty-gritty and really show up and be there for the client.
Sure. We've got a question from Mike Rogers, who's asking you, Lucien, as the human is sort of managing a larger number of events as a result of the productivity that their AI twin is enabling, how does the human teach the agent the additional sort of nuances that they will be learning through that greater management?
Yeah, that's a good question. In our business, I think that data is the moat, right? Because we are not building an AI model, but what is really interesting is that we have years of historics of bookings, conversations by emails, phones. And so we are feeding the agents with all those unique data. And that allows us to give like very customized answers. And, you have 4 years of different briefs coming from customers and different conversations with different tones and the way you should answer depending on the countries. And that's actually our way to feed the agents. And so, yeah, data is the moat. And the good thing is we are trying to build a kind of positive flywheel, because the more we are managing bookings, the more we are gaining data. And this is how we are leveraging then the AI models. And we are getting precise about it. Yeah.
Right. Thibault, in the prep call, you mentioned that people get stuck in AI pilots for reasons which are not necessarily technological. Could you sort of expand on this point, please?
Yeah, sure. I'd say there are really two areas where people will get stuck. Number one, and I briefly mentioned it before, at the pilot stage, I think sometimes people set ambitions that are way too high for what the agents could become. And therefore, they get disappointed and they give up, or they lose the trust from the team on the value that AI can bring. And I think what was discussed in this call about having humans in the loop, I think is a key element. Like, you don't necessarily need to automate an entire workflow. What you want is reallocate basically the less added value tasks from humans to agents when it makes sense, and you need to build your way into it. If you're way too ambitious, you'll get kind of right, but not exactly right, and therefore you'll get disappointed and you'll lose the trust. But the second, I think, more interesting piece where it breaks, and it's not necessarily breaking at the prototype stage, but it may break later at the industrialization. And I think now everybody's thinking about industrialization, is governance. Governance means a lot of different things. One, agreeing on the trade-offs you're willing to make. So you have the CEO, you have security, you have finance, you have business owners. They all have different incentives and different ways of looking at things. If you cannot get security and business owners to align, and you don't have a clear decision-making process, then you're going to get stuck, because you're going to be in a loop where people disagree, but there's no one really to make a call on even just being able to get started. I think the second is about, it's important to treat AI, I think, as a factor of production, not as just a software tool. And what I mean by this is, when you think about companies, you have full-time employees, you have outsourced employees, you have different types of resources. And I strongly believe that AI is a new form of resource that's agentic, that's to which you are reallocating a part of the job. And when you think about it this way, a lot of things need to happen in order to really be effective. One is, who owns the allocation of the budget towards this. So when you think about the staffing plan of people, it's not the HR team that defines for every single team what roles they need, what type of things they need to do. And when you treat it way too centrally, the problem is you're going to get quasi-right, but not exactly right, or you're going to set artificial constraints that are going to be a problem. So you're going to tell them, yes, you can allocate up to 40 euros or pounds here to agentic AI per month, but this may be way like underinvested versus what you would need. And so you want to make sure that you really have the business owners kind of accountable for making sure that they allocate AI where they need and empowered to do so. And when it's not the case, you're going to end up like kind of stuck in there. Security is the same. When you have a staffing plan, you want to make sure you run background checks on your employees, like you have some criteria for whether these employees are actually good for business. If your agents can pull from your laptop and do crazy things without you being able to monitor what they've been doing, it may be a big red line. Same, if you pull information that's way too sensitive for some agents and there's a risk of exposing that sensitive data, it's a no-go. And so getting all of these questions basically figured out, how you think about ownership, budget, security, usually when you've got them right, you can, with the same technology, really, really transform your organization. And when you don't, you'll get stuck.
Right, there's a lot there. Yeah, Omar, please jump in.
There's a term that I've sort of stolen from the system design world that I'm trying to roll into the thought of AI. So I thought with everything that we've talked about, there's been a lot of mention about trust, and Thibault, you just mentioned when people initially start using AI, if it doesn't give them the answers they're looking for, they sort of give up. So the term I've been rolling around is the idea of the principle of least surprise, which is the idea that if a system has a high astonishment factor, you probably need to redesign the capabilities in the set. And I think that's a very poignant way to describe what AI is. If AI is surprising us with the answer whenever we ask it the same question over and over again, we lose the trust in the answers and we lose the trust in the capabilities. If we solve for this by applying the governance, by applying the training, the human in the loop, the change management, these are all ways that we reduce the principle of surprise, essentially, where we now the AI models are reliable and the processes are reliable, and we can hand off from human to AI like Lucien and the team have done, where initially we're hand-holding and we're guiding because the answers are a little surprising sometimes. And then as we guide and we train and we provide the instructions and the skills and the data and everything else, we reduce that gap where we can then really roll out and gain the benefit of AI in that sequence.
Yeah, just to bounce on this, because I think it's really key. Like if you want to get started and kind of walk your way up to more automation, start by asking the agents to do things you already know, analyze recent deals, etc. Because you have the intuition on whether the agents are getting it right or not. And the more you build trust in making sure that what you know is actually being done right, the more you'll be able to offload down the road. Sometimes you try to do things that, as Omar said, like you have no clue like about the answer, so it breaks the trust very quickly because you get surprised.
Sure, Jannat, are you seeing sort of companies piloting stuff that they've actually already done in order to ensure that reliability?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love that phrase, principle of least surprise. I'm certainly going to take that away and use that with the portfolio as well. But yeah, you definitely see people coming back to the drawing board. And I think that's part of the beauty of pilot, right? You should be iterating, you should be figuring out what works. And if you're not sure, don't take it into production. And I think, from a client side perspective, when we see our portfolio companies selling in, these clients the ink isn't even dry on their AI policy. It iterates, it changes. So what would have already been a lengthy procurement process is getting that bit lengthier, and there's that bit more nervousness to Thibault's point about, now for certain things, a human may not be in the loop, and that is a huge, huge leap of faith for an enterprise or a client side to take. So you do have to keep coming back to get the client comfortable or get yourself comfortable if you're in the pilot phase. And that's why you should come back to the drawing board. But the other reason why you should come back beyond governance and all the safety measures that have been mentioned is also cost. When you do something in, this segment of data, this segment of the business, maybe with this many users before rolling it out more broadly, you get a sense of cost like this. And quite often when you roll it out further, or when you make it part of your company processes in general, the cost is not just linear, it can become quite exponential. And I think a lot of people are getting aware that, that these token costs of the underlying AI models, they creep up and they add up. And there are memes already about the kind of invoices that people are seeing from the big guys. So cost control is also a big part of what's going on with bringing things back to the drawing board, because in the pilot, you might have asked for all the bells and whistles possible and then realized that when you actually take it forward, my goodness, this is totally out of budget. And then after the event, somebody in finance says that's way beyond the budget that we sanctioned. We had no idea it could escalate to this level. Please bring it back. Equally, if you're a portfolio company or a company that is offering AI services, and historically you had the hallowed SaaS, beautiful gross margin of, say, high 80, 90% kind of gross margins. Now, if your service offering is actually AI, your margin's going to get killed. And we can talk about that maybe later if we have time. But if you're offering AI as well, you also don't see what the costs would become when your client is piloting with you versus when they're actually in production with you. So you're also taking a hit. So it's while governance is obviously, and safety is first and foremost, the cost could kill a company or kill a startup very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. How much would you say that companies are spending on these tools and deploying agents now compared to a year ago? How like concretely, how much would you say they are rising?
I mean, it depends. There are companies where they're willing to, for a particular workflow, pay as much or even more than the equivalent human salary, given that this agent will work round the clock, work through lunch, not take holidays, etc. So the way they anchor for the kind of budget that they have for a particular workflow might be the equivalent to a human or human plus, or maybe 2 to 3 humans. In other cases, you see things that are maybe more experimental, and you kind of quantify it as R&D spend, and that can sometimes be uncapped as well. But where you see it play out is the way when cloud was introduced, and in an early stage company, you take the hit on your gross margins. You don't have usually, unless you've grown particularly quickly and achieved hyperscale very quickly. In the early stages, your gross margins are maybe around 60%, because the cloud cost that you're consuming is not yet reaching that economies of scale. So we're seeing a similar pattern play out with AI as well, where gross margins on companies that are offering AI are coming down to that 50-60% level at the early stages to be able to capitalize on that growth later.
Sure. Omar, how are you seeing your customers sort of wrestle with the costs and factor it into their decision making about using Box?
Yeah, now I'm going to start using the principle of least surprise time and time again for every different factor. And I think cost is definitely one of those things as well. When you can make the responses and the output and the generation a predictable model, that then also helps from the prediction of the sizing and the scaling and the cost of the associated approach as well. If you're constantly having to, I mean, that's the great thing about the pilot phase, is it's an exploration. It's to understand all these different things, what worked and what didn't work, and what didn't work is equally as important. And then you focus and you narrow down your scope to what does work, and then from there you can kind of go into it. We see there's definitely been a shift and a change in the organizations and the companies that we've talked to, and really trying to quantify the value or the add out of it. We deal with unstructured content, so often legal teams and contracts is a key term that comes to us. So anecdotally, I can tell a story of a client that came to us and said, "Look, the Strait of Hormuz incident that happened recently had a big impact on the services they needed to provide to their clients, and they needed to understand what information they should notify their customers about based on the agreements and the terms of the contracts." That fell down to one poor individual who spent his entire weekend at his family's house trolling through different contracts, different documents, trying to find the appropriate information, which was time, effort, responsibilities to clients and customers, etc. These sort of things are quantifiable measures and metrics that we can use. So if we take that as the problem, use AI to define it in a predictable pattern to get the approach that whenever we ask these kind of questions, we're confident in the answer. That then shows us how much time saved, effort saved, efficiency gained, time lost, etc. And then use that to generate a model of predictability when it comes to the cost.
Really useful. Lucien, how predictable were your costs for the AI twins? When you sort of, how much you're spending on it now, what you expected to be spending on it? Yeah.
So obviously we had a lot of surprises too. I think a lot of tech company were not used to the cost of the energy because this is what is compute is now the new oil in a way, and we were not used to get into our business plan this kind of energy and to think in terms of multiplier. So how much you can value the energy to produce something and to sell it. So this is now very important for the AI twin because we're not even thinking about using AI to replace humans. You need to leverage them because you need to get way more value if you wanted to make it like interesting in terms of finance. So at start, obviously, we had a lot of we spent a lot. What we are doing now is that we have now more multi-models approach, and we are getting more and more into the open source one. So you got a lot of them currently in Europe. You got Mistral, but you got also Llama 4, you got Gemma. And the idea, I think, that could be interesting, especially in the service industry, what we're doing is building your own layer with your own data and then using the models. I think this is one of the most efficient way to control your spendings and what is going to happen in the next months.
Thibault, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because like one of Dust's value proposition is to say that we have basically the agentic platform, but we provide a different set of model providers and in order to solve for exactly that. I think right now, like it's not about necessarily people spending more. It's more like this is for granted, and maybe it's a good thing. I think there's going to be a rise in AI spend, and if anything, probably companies are not spending enough on AI. The question is more: are you allocating the spend in the right spots for the right things? What we've seen is sometimes people will try to have like a spread out, for instance, distribution of AI spend that's kind of uniform. That's not going to work because in some areas you actually want to really be able to invest a lot because it's saving a lot of money. We talked about the legal example. Like these examples are very striking, and the business owners know what really works and what doesn't. But the second is, how do you, like right now it's been kind of an open bar on AI, and I think labs are doing a lot of work to justify their valuation, and therefore they bring more and more like cutting edge models that are token greedy and expensive. And when you're in prototyping phase, you don't necessarily realize indeed that the cost may blow up. But now we're getting into a notion where yes, it's as Lucien said, a new oil or a new energy source, or like intelligence is a new resource, and you want to have a wide portfolio of that resource to make sure that it works. So maybe like you don't need to use the like latest Claude Opus model or Fable model to run rewording your emails. And right now, people are not really sensitive to that. The wider your portfolio, the more resilient you'll be in terms of cost, but also in terms of just resilience overall. So if for instance, a model provider is scarce on resources to serve these models, they may be down very often. And when you've automated your workflows, you're going to struggle just serving your own service because the energy ran out, right? Or if let's say a world leader of a country that's out on the other side of the ocean decides to cut access to some of these models for whatever reason, you may end up very dependent on their decisions to run your own business. And so the multi-model, multi-provider aspect is essential for cost, and probably even more than just that. And when you think about like building your AI for your organization, you should really be thinking about how you feed into intelligence into your system and where you find this intelligence.
Jannat, are you seeing companies sort of shift their pricing models in order to kind of accommodate everything that Thibault just said?
Yeah, I mean, maybe coming back to exactly what Thibault just said, we're talking about, and Lucien, we're talking about being more efficient by being multi-model. This is very similar to the multi-cloud wave that we had before. It's the principle from financially is exactly the same. Don't lock in entirely with one vendor when it comes to something like this. Diversify, pick the right spend. And I see there's a question, I'll touch on it, about FinOps. FinOps is essential to help manage these kinds of costs. If you're a bigger organization and you actually have an FP&A team, it's not unusual to have a business partner who focuses solely on cloud spend. In some larger listed companies, you'll have a specialist analyst who is just working on your AWS contracts, your Azure contracts, etc., and your other sources of cloud, and just optimizing on spending on those. I don't think we're very far away from, and I think there are already some more advanced companies who are doing exactly this for token spend and model spend. So this is definitely happening. And then similarly, the same FP&A team is also working or strategic finance team, if you will. That was my from a previous life, what I used to do as well. You work on repricing your tool to make sure it reflects the value that you're now delivering, especially if you've added AI as a feature to what you deliver, or if it's made your offering better, even if it is that invisible force behind. But definitely pricing is being adjusted as needed, provided the market is willing.
Sure, great. We've also got a question from Maria about how skills are changing along with AI implementation. So maybe, Lucien, if we use your AI twins example, how are you sort of upskilling the people who were doing that work in order to be, sort of AI agent managers as you were? And what sort of challenges have you encountered with that? And is the talent that you're hiring for now different to what it was a year or two ago?
Yeah, this is actually a good challenge. What we can see from our point of view is that execution becomes kind of a commodity. Everybody can do it like now with AI, and the huge transition is to makes all, even an IC needs to become an orchestrator of agents. So this is different because you were only working for yourself on individual tasks, and now you need to think about in system, in architecture. So it looks a little bit like the job of an engineer more. This is new. It is, I have to say, sometimes painful because people were not used to it, but in a way, it's more gratifying. Intellectually, it's way more interesting to get to this point where you can manage different agents, you can manage the execution so that you can focus on judgment, taste, the real decisions, what makes us really unique, and why we will always work with this kind of agents. I think this is, for example, at Naboo, 10% of your annual evaluation is based on the way you are now orchestrating agents and your relationship to AI. And I think it will be the same in every company. The younger you are, I think the easier it is. I don't always agree when I see a lot of tech companies saying that they're not hiring juniors anymore, because I think that in terms of personality, they're more used to this kind of change, and it can get harder when you get more senior people. And this is what we are actually working on right now, the transition from traditional IC to agents orchestrator.
Mm-hmm. And Omar, are you seeing a similar thing with your customers?
Yeah, the technology is, as with most things, is only a subset of the challenge. The organizational change and the adoption and the education and the steering is definitely one of the things. Lucien, your last comment there kind of made me smirk because I remember talking to my sister who recently graduated. She was like, in school, I used to use ChatGPT and all these other tools, and then I come into the business world and they gave me email, and now I have to communicate with people email. It's weird that we hire people based on archaic or traditional systems, whereas there's so much other technology that these younger generation can use and kind of go into. So we put a lot of emphasis and focus on the organizational change as well. It's not only about can you make the models predictable, but can people interact with it? Can you set the right instructions? Can you make repeatable patterns and go through those approaches? So that's always key to making sure that what you've got is successful.
To get really into the weeds of that, Lucien, like what sort of interview questions are you asking now that maybe you wouldn't have asked a year or two ago? How are you assessing that?
So to be very concrete, what we are doing now during interviews is case studies where we are asking during, for example, a 1 hour case study, we are providing, for example, Claude co-work to the candidates, and we're asking him to organize a system at first in theory of agents for his own work that was present on the test job, right? And to understand how we can organize them. And this is the first thing. And if we have time, we are running a first experiment with a very small test just to understand if he's fluent or this is just only like full theory and LinkedIn, right? So this is now the real thing you need to check.
Great. Thibault, are you hearing of companies doing similar things?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like most advanced companies really have let's say, an entire program, right? It comes from hiring, onboarding, reskilling, how they measure performance as well. And yeah, if you have a real transformation program, you're more likely to be successful because if you took the current technology and everybody was like getting it to the next level or the current level, actually, you'd already have transformed companies everywhere. So like that's definitely something that's happening. In terms of what companies look for or like what changes, I think in their hiring process. So obviously for us internally, because we need to be slightly ahead of the wave, like we set a very, very high bar. One thing that we look for in people is, can they see beyond what's currently there? So when we like usually people ask them, like we're going to ask like, are they effective at their current job? Yes. But the question is like, are they seeing how their current job will be different 6 months from now, and are they working on getting ready for that new wave? Because 2 years ago you had no coding agents, you had nothing, right? And the ability to reinvent yourself is really a skill that was less important back in the days because you had more time to adjust. I think that's really the one thing that you want people to really evaluate them on and kind of build that critical thinking. And as it was said before, we talked about system design. I think it's also just management skills in general. Like now your success in execution comes not through your own actions, but through other people usually, but now also agents doing the work. And therefore you need to know what good looks like. You need to know, like, to be really clear in your thinking and your expressing of what good looks like and what is expected. And this is typically what you would expect from managers, right? They don't necessarily give the answer or do the job instead of someone, but they're going to lay out the foundations for the person to be successful. That's kind of the same type of skills that people are really developing with agents.
Jannat, does that sort of resonate with the advice that you're giving people in terms of maybe more underappreciated skills that you should be hiring for?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Thibault said, management is about delivering through others, and there are certainly plenty of skills that are not yet on the path of being disrupted, if you will, by AI. But equally, there are roles that people need to be willing to be flexible about internally. So people should be thinking ahead. People should be within their own companies thinking about, even if I'm not leveling up, how do I level myself to the AI version of me? What is my role if I'm the human in the loop? How do I become a subject matter expert in the process to be able to vet the AI? How do I become the person who knows the process end to end to be able to translate it into an agent or a workflow? So I think there's still so much value in domain knowledge. And that's what keeps things going. But definitely, we're seeing that change in hiring. And in our field, there's always been case studies and so on in the hiring process to, either ensure technical fit, cultural fit, all of the above. But there's also now way more AI literacy testing coming in, particularly in certain organizations. I'm sure my peers are seeing it already, and I think Lucien talked about it already. So we're advising on that as well to make sure that you're hiring forward rather than hiring what we've seen before.
Sure. And on that AI literacy point, Omar, I'm sure a big part of your job is educating people about AI. How have your how is that, and how has that aspect of your job changed over the past few years?
It's an interesting one. There's a different kind of pattern when there is a consumer-based service that then turns into a business-based service. And the way that our brains adapt to using something in our day-to-day and then adapting it into the world of work. We've seen a lot of tools that are business focused. So CRM, any operational tools, these have all been designed to help with the business side of things. But then if we talk about those three pillars, the individual productivity, a lot of those improvements and enhancements often stem from commercial based products or things that are generally available to the public. So where people have started to use the likes of ChatGPT and Claude and things, and when they introduce it to the business world, there's a point of friction that tends to happen, which is I'm an individual and I want to improve the process that I work in, but the organization has defined the process. And so how do you sort of match those two things together and introduce new areas? And I think this is where sometimes the pilots tend to sort of fall short, is that you have people with aspirations and intentions. And in a pilot, the world is your oyster and everyone's open for fair game. Yeah, sure, do whatever you want. But then when we introduce something that we think is validated and you put it against the context of your business, that's when people start going, okay, well, that doesn't quite fit with our ethos or our approach or our handling, or we haven't considered how it will sort of, as we've just discussed before, the handover from one team to the other, what information and justifications do we need? So those sort of tend to become the challenges that we see around that use of it all. But it's a growing trend, and the coming back to the trust notion that we've talked about here. A year ago, KPMG did a study globally, and they found that 50% of people were comfortable and trusted AI. And then just 2 years later, that number's jumped up to about 70 or 80%. People are a lot more open in admitting when they don't check the information that AI gives them, which means they implicitly trust it. And then compare that to where businesses sort of want to go through. There was a recent study, I forget the source of it, that I read the other day that said sort of in the UK, 70% of people surveyed are now happy for AI to handle their financial data. And that's a step that we would have thought like 2 years ago. Again, this principle of least surprise, people would have been very considerate of that. And so we go through. So, times change, and as you adapt, the process kind of evolves with it as we go.
And so, Lucien, back to the sort of invisibility point, like how aware are your customers that they are talking to agents rather than humans? And are you, if they're not, are you thinking about telling them? How are you thinking about that aspect?
Yeah. So we are mainly working so we have an enterprise business unit, so everything has to be very clear and transparent. So what we are saying basically is we are telling to people that their account manager has an AI twin. What we have understood, and we made a lot of mistakes about it too, is we were trying to bring people on our own platform, but I do think that things are getting more and more headless. So we are now communicating on their own channels, very simple ones. So meaning text, emails, Slack or Microsoft Teams tooling. So they have just to chat on it. What I've seen is that for 80% of the job, like all the back and forth mostly on text communication, they don't really care about it because it's so customized that you're providing the right information really quickly and they're searching for it. But whenever they want immediately to talk to somebody, you need to be present. You need to stand up and to get the ownership, because this is how you're building trust. So basically, in terms of governance, it comes down to one principle for us, is that the account manager is always accountable for the twin, right? This is why we named it twin. We are not delegating to a kind of black box where nobody is responsible anymore for what the AI is doing. And the human stays in control of the decisions. And to answer to the question of Mike, it's not a black box. We got an interface built on our back office where basically you can see every action from the twin. You can validate them or you can correct them. This is how we are also feeding into the loop, like the agents. And this will always be the case.
And do you have any statistics at the front of your mind about like how often you are correcting these and how that has changed over the deployment period?
Yeah, I think that we are now only correcting what we call like edge cases, right? So the good thing about the corporate event industry is that there is a lot of commodity, meaning that there is a lot of standards So this is actually a good case study for agentic workflows, but there are always new things. People who comes up with very original briefs or anything. And so on that matter, sometimes it's exactly the same as what we were doing before. The AI twin is going to send an information through the email, and then the account manager is going to send a second email saying that's okay, that was not enough as an answer. So I'm going to take the leads right now, and I'm going to provide you an exhaustive answer about it. And so it kind of looks the same of what we were doing before, right? You just need to be very transparent about it and very intellectually honest. I think this is also one of the biggest problem right now is when you're trying to hide, you're not building a high trust environment and it cannot go well, especially in the service industry.
Sure. Thibault, do you see a sort of similar attitude with a lot of your customers?
Related to the invisibility of agents specifically, or yeah. Well, a lot of our agents are more internal facing. So what people really care about is more the outcome of what the agents have done. So yes, what I see for sure, and what customers see is if the agent is producing something that's like AI slop or like not exactly useful, like this becomes a problem, and it's obvious that it's AI. But it's not so much about the fact that AI has produced it. It's more that probably the humans who've been working with these agents have not put enough of their added value so that the AI executes well. And I think that's like really one of the guiding frameworks for when you work with AI agents. Always asking yourself, as I said multiple times in this call, if you treat it as a resource, just like humans, then you're asking, where do humans actually add value and where do they not add value? And you want to make sure that this mix is correct. It's the same with management, right? Like I've been in many situations where I'm going to meet with a customer, for instance, and sometimes people just want me to be here so that they realize that somebody is there to listen, and somebody is there, and somebody important to the company is there to listen. It's not about being rationally giving the answer. It's about much more than that. And I think the same parallel applies to agentic. And I think this is what Lucien touched on, right? Sometimes I want to talk to someone. It's not so much because I want a fast answer. It's because I want to have somebody who cares about me, and humans are much better at this. And so really what's critical when you think about using AI is what's the real question or the real outcome that people are looking for. It's not just the answer. Very often it's much more than the answer. And as my former manager told me many times, you're rarely going to convince somebody just because you're right. Sometimes it takes more. And I think it's a good guiding principle. Like it's not just because AI is very rational and very intelligent that it's going to necessarily be effective at what it's supposed to be doing.
Sure, that's very good advice. Jannat, just on that point about AI slop, how is the ability for founders and teams to automate stuff very quickly, how is that affecting the day-to-day of your job? What sort of stuff are you getting on your desk which maybe you weren't getting a couple of years ago, and what sort of skills have you developed as a result of that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think things are definitely changing. I would say right now, maybe 2 years ago, things that weren't strictly speaking AI were, getting AI in the name and trying to promote that. Now I'd say there are genuine efforts in the product to have AI offerings or be more AI native, or at least if they were running in parallel a legacy business and an AI kind of twin of their other product offering and migrating clients across. So we're seeing that as well. I'd say now the keyword that is not always strictly the case is agentic. So I think a lot of companies are aspiring to be agentic and perhaps overpromise on what agentic really is in their organization. Sometimes it is more like RAG. Sometimes it's actually still an AI workflow and certainly human in the loop. So I'd say that is probably the word that I see on my desk that I question a little bit more. And then in terms of other things, I would say the companies that are exciting me the most are the ones that have a clear grasp of a particular domain. So I love going down rabbit holes, so it just appeals to me as my personality as well. But they might have got a solution to a very, very specific problem in international taxation. They might have a solution to a very, very specific problem in law. And I know that we have numerous AI companies in the legal field right now. I don't even need to name them. You know who they are. They might have a very, very specific domain problem that they're solving in industrials, lift maintenance, bovine health, you know, these kinds of things. So those are the things that are really exciting me when I meet somebody with genuine domain expertise who's collected data that you haven't even seen before. And data is still very, very much part of the game. I think we could talk for ages just on that. And then they build the intelligence on top of that. And for me, that's absolutely magic. So getting familiar with very, very specific things. And multimodal AI, so with imagery, with video, with audio, with all these kinds of files, not just, you know, the classical vision of data, which might be seem as tabular, and doing something really special in a domain with that. And that's what we're seeing increasingly now, where these domain experts are saying, right, I can build with AI, I'm coming to the table, and that's what gets me really excited.
No, I resonate with that as a journalist too, who sent a lot of information about different companies. You know, I see a subject line about a lift maintenance startup, and I'm like, oh God. And then you speak to the founder, and it's like, wow, this is amazing. Someone's really gone deep.
Yeah, the more boring, the better, because it's actually fascinating.
Yes, that's a great point to end on. Thank you to everyone who has joined, and I'm so sorry if we weren't able to get to your questions. Thank you to Lucien, Omar, Jannat, and Thibault for your insights. Thank you to our partner Box for their support. And please check out the website for the next Sifted Talks. I believe there is a link in the chat now. But thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye.